Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman.
Hello everybody and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm your host Chris.
And I'm Linz.
And how's it going today, Linz?
Good. Back in Blighty. It was a good Halloween. Did some Ouija board stuff. I did record it, so that'll be out at some point. We did miss Halloween, but we're spooky all year round, so I guess we can put that out whenever, and it does fit in with my whole trying to be convinced that mediumship and people with psychic abilities are legit, which is not working so far, but I'm still hoping. I want to believe, as you would say, Chris. Yeah, I did the Ouija board on Halloween, and there's a whole story behind it. We were like, okay, the veil is at its thinnest, and we want to contact the previous owner of the home. We had some little offerings that we knew she liked just from things she left behind, like cigarettes and vodka. And we even had her ashtray. So it was quite funny, and also an exercise in, I know there's like a psychological thing behind why the Ouija board works for some and not others. So we try to test that and see if it kind of worked for us. So that will be coming in the future. So what did you do, Chris?
Not a whole lot. It was my first Halloween with my young son, so I was just content in dressing him up in silly costumes and taking pictures of him.
Wasn't he Baby Yoda?
He was
Grogu.
He was Grogu. He was Baby Yoda.
Oh, he's too young to do like the kid Halloween stuff at the moment.
But
next
year, I think so. So I've got to think up some. I've got to think up some costumes, some family costume ideas for that.
Yes, well, I'm classing myself as family because I'm a godparent. So that I've always wanted to be Hulk Hogan. All I need is a mustache. And I've always wanted you to be the Ultimate Warrior. So, I'm sure we can think of two more retro-tastic wrestlers for your wife and child. Definitely. I mean, come on.
I think having a tiny child dressed up as the Big Boss Man would just be adorable.
Sorry, I was joking. That's why my laugh sounded so weird. I didn't expect you to make me laugh while I took that one sip. But So your wife could be oh God, what was that? Who was it? C-3PO.
Goldust.
Goldust, yes. We watched like old school wrestling with Chris' wife, and her commentary was just absolutely hilarious. Like, we need to do a watch along with Chris' wife. Because, like, with old school wrestling, because it was just the funniest shit ever. Like, she had me laughing so hard.
She's never seen it before. Just snippets here and there. And every time she sees it, she comes out with the most amazing comments.
It's so good.
Yeah. So just before we get into today's episode, just as a reminder, you can get any images that go along with today over on our Instagram, which is
d.s.radio.
And if you're feeling especially friendly,
Well, especially friendly, Chris. Oh, okay. We do have some friendly listeners I see in the DMs.
well, if you're feeling especially friendly or especially generous, then you can also join our Patreon.
Patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio. And you will help us with paying for the costs of, the uploads and just everything. And
so on.
Things may be coming to you. If you're a member on there,
Exactly.
We're working on it.
We have a plan in place. We're being defeated at every turn on it, but we do have a plan in place, so we will get there very shortly.
It's in the works now, at least.
So, Linz, let me ask you a question. Have you ever lost an object that meant a lot to you?
You know what? I don't think I have. I'm actually really, really good with not losing stuff. I've probably jinxed myself now. No, I haven't, actually.
Oh, well, lucky for you. I am what is officially known as a klutz. So I lose things constantly. I actually nearly lost my bank card today, which was great. But probably the worst thing that I did lose was once on a Tokyo subway, I lost a camera.
No, like an SLR?
Yeah, DSLR.
Shit. Did you get it back?
Yeah, it's Japan. So luckily...
Oh my God, yes.
Luckily, it just went to the end of the track. Nobody touched it. Staff member picked it up and I just had to go collect it. So yeah, yay for that. That would not happen in the UK.
On that story, a quick one. I met a guy in Thailand who got politely mugged for his DSLR. And before they took the camera, they threatened him at knife point. Before they took the camera, they said, you can take your memory card if you want.
Oh, that's quite nice of them.
So the most polite mugging ever. But yeah, Japan still wins. You get it all back.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, a camera with some holiday snaps isn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, organizations, or even countries lose much worse things than a camera. Much more dangerous things.
Oh, God.
If the cogs are going in your brain right now, what do you think is the worst thing that a country could lose?
Like a nuclear weapon or some kind of military secrets.
Ooh, well, that is right. Well done.
No way!
Nuclear weapons.
Yes!
Or perhaps even worse than that, multiple nuclear weapons.
No!
So let me hit with a fact scarier than anything we presented in Halloween spooky season. We don't know how many nukes have been lost.
Quote unquote lost, don't you mean, Chris?
Well, there is some classification we're going to get into in a moment, but it is terrifying to know the fact that there is nuclear material out there unaccounted for.
Oh, God.
The USA officially publishes records of these incidents, but have they published them all? Who knows? But no other nuclear nation publishes records of these incidents. Which nations are nuclear, Linz?
Like a bunch of them. We are. The US is.
Yeah.
The little rocket man in North Korea is always threatening the US. A bunch.
Yeah.
A lot of rich European countries.
Yeah, well, it's less than you might think, actually. So the countries that officially have nuclear weapons are the UK, France, Iran, Pakistan, India, China, North Korea, Russia, and of course, Uncle Sam.
Wait, is that it? Why did I think there was a lot of rich European countries that would have had nukes?
Yeah, I thought the same. I thought
Strange.
that there may be, other countries that haven't. Maybe Germany might have one.
That's exactly who I thought would have them. But now in hindsight, maybe they're like, oh, we don't want to, be part of that. How strange. I honestly did not know that there was only a handful. I've learned something already.
Now, I'm not 100% sure if NATO or the European Union, I don't believe they have nukes of their own, but they can draw on their member states' nukes, I do believe. So,
yes.
In which case, that would be the UK, France, the USA. The latter, though, that we talked about, the USA is the only one that publishes details of lost nukes. Now, worldwide, in most recent estimates, there are 12,705 nuclear weapons, 90% of which are owned between the USA and Russia. But this is actually down, way down, from the peak in 1985, when the world had a staggering 63,632 nukes. So much like a hoarder that is slowly getting rid of all those TV guides from the 80s, the world is bit by bit moving towards being the least nuclear it has ever been since the 1950s, despite recent threats.
But Chris, it's not that easy to get rid of nuclear weapons. So are they just burying them on some sad country and slowly letting them just become more and more worrisome?
Yeah, I'm not exactly.
The longer they sit.
I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, how you denuclearify. That is not the word for it. But
I don't think you can. I think you can just put them. I don't know where that goes, and wherever it goes, it doesn't go quickly. Is it just sitting there dormant?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you might be able to repurpose the nuclear material, potentially, in, nuclear power plants and so on. Obviously, far more countries, have nuclear power plants. So
I'm uneducated on this, at least.
I am too. I didn't actually look that up in part of my research. But if you know at home, how do you get rid of a nuke? Let us know. I do have a few ideas.
If a listener knows that, I'm really worried about what kind of listeners we have.
I think Livy will know. Livy will definitely know how to get rid of
Livy knows everything. I love Livy. Every time we get a DM from Livy, I'm like, this is going to be some good shit. Shout out to Livy, we love you.
We do. So, as I mentioned, the USA does publish these incidents, and they have a very cool name for them. Of course they do. It's America. Before I tell you, Linz, any guesses? What would you call a incident that has lost, well, we've lost a nuke?
Operation something Toxic Avenger.
Well, I mean, that's something Toxic Avenger. Yeah, that works. I'll give you a clue. There's actually a John Woo action movie with the same name, Broken Arrow.
Ooh, I like that. That's good. It's better than the really niche thing that I came up with.
Well, the USA actually has different classifications of nuclear incidents, and all of them sound like fantastic names for heavy metal bands. So I'm going to go through some of these with you.
Okay.
The first one.
Do we have to guess the metal genre of each potential band?
Yeah, go on. So the first one is Dull Sword.
Oh God, Dull Sword. That's going to be like an 80s, like power metal, I think.
Okay. Well, Dull Sword refers to an incident involving an impairment of deployment, but it does not have to involve nuclear material itself, although it can do. So essentially, this is like a rather minor incident that needs to be identified and rectified to prevent issues in the event of nuclear deployment. Think of something in the chain going wrong, but not so wrong that you lost a nuclear weapon.
Yep, sounds pretty minor. Dull sword. You've got a dull sword, Chris.
Hey, don't tell anybody. Definitely don't tell anybody I've got the next classification, which is bent spear.
Well, you do have a bent spear.
So what genre of metal would you give to that one?
Bent spear is like porno grind.
Well, a bent spear incident is when there is an incident involving nuclear material, but is mainly relating to a breach of handling or security. So an example of this was in 2007, when a B-52 bomber was mistakenly loaded up with 6 missiles with live nuclear warheads during an internal flight from base to base.
How do you accidentally load that into any craft?
That would be a good motto just to keep by your side for the duration of today's episode. I'll put it this way.
Do we have to suspend our disbelief here, Chris?
Unfortunately not.
Oh, shit.
So the next classification is empty quiver.
Oh my God. We'd have to come up with a new subgenre of metal for that. Maybe like emotional metal. Emo metal.
Well, this is the active theft or loss of a fully functioning nuclear weapon. So this is the type of thing that you will see in a Bond movie. You know, when they're like, you know, they've got an active nuke, James, and you've got 12 hours to get to Barbados, and and sleep with as many ladies as possible. The Queen is
strange
counting
names.
on you. The King is counting on you. Sleep with as many women as you can until you get that code.
Is that what they call it?
Well, to our knowledge, there has never been an empty quiver incident, thankfully.
Well, not, at least not in the lives of people other than you.
So the next classification is faded giant.
Oh God, that's like some European hard metal. I like that, like a Nordic death metal. Yeah, I like that.
This is quite difficult to define, so I'll just give you an example, which was the 3 Mile Island incident. Essentially a military nuclear reactor incident. So it's like any other nuclear power plant incident, but specifically an incident that occurs at one that's run by the military.
Ah, not Mr. Burns.
No. And next we have nuke flash.
Nice. That's like thrash for sure.
So this is the highest ranking of incident, which involves the unauthorized detonation or threat of a nuke, either by deterioration, accidental launch, or the unauthorized flying of a nuclear weapon over another nuclear nation's airspace. So again, thankfully nothing to report that we know of here, although that incident I mentioned earlier with the B-52 bomber that was accidentally loaded up with nukes could have become a nuke flash incident if it had been, flying over France to a base in Germany.
If it had been sin, Mulder.
Well, yes. So what we're going to talk about today are broken arrow incidents, of which there have been 32 officially reported.
Don't.
Yeah, Sector 7G's got a lot to account for here.
Yeah.
So a broken arrow incident is defined as an unexpected event involving nuclear weapons that result in the accidental launching, firing, detonating, theft, or loss of a nuclear weapon.
No. How do you... Oh, okay, we'll get into it.
How do you lose a nuclear weapon?
Yeah, that was going to be the question, but I'm sure you're going to answer it in this episode somewhere.
Well, the fact there's been 32 of these incidents that have officially been reported would imply quite easily.
Yeah.
Now, broken arrow incidents differ from, say, empty quiver incidents in so much that in broken arrows, the bombs are normally incomplete or unarmed weapons. So they are unlikely to cause a nuclear incident, but if somebody was to get their hands on them, it could certainly lead to one.
Yes.
So as I mentioned earlier, only the USA fesses up to its mistakes here and publishes when a bomb goes missing. Russia, on the other hand, has no such reporting system, and we have no idea how many nukes the Soviet Union and or Russia may have lost over the years.
Classic Russia and China things.
Several incidents are known, probably the most famous of which was in 1968, when a Soviet K-129 submarine sank near Hawaii. Can a submarine sink?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. I mean,
it just stops moving.
It ceased to float. We'll put it that way. It is an
I mean, if it hits the surface, surface sounds weird. If it hits the bottom and doesn't move again, it's sunk or scuttled, Chris.
So now, being near Hawaii, the good old US of A was more than aware of it and launched a quite frankly hilarious scheme, which sounds like the plot to Carry On Nuking. They launched Project Azorian, in which
sexy.
In which they asked the eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes to pretend to become suddenly interested in deep sea mining, which is a thing that rich people do, apparently.
Still sexy.
But this was all a cunning plan. What they were actually doing was building a massive claw inside an oil rig to pick up the submarine and retrieve its deadly cargo.
Like a big skeletal Misfits mechanical hand. This can't be real. Like a grabby machine, a claw machine at an arcade.
Exactly. However, just like all claw machines, it was rigged. And just as they were about to drop it in the slot and receive their nuclear prize, the submarine broke into pieces, and the nukes returned to the deep to keep the company of the giant squid.
How convenient.
So returning...
For the squid.
Oh my God, the squids have got nukes. So let's return back to the States for a second, and you'll be happy to know that most of the bombs were safely recovered and are back in the loving arms of the US of A.
Aww.
Most of them.
Oh.
The others are very much still out there, Linz. And as I said, it's unlikely that these will go off. There are numerous safety features that have been installed on the weapons to prevent anything but an intended nuclear explosion. Without getting too far into it and being schooled by someone who knows much more about this subject than I do, essentially a nuclear bomb must be primed. And without the priming, you can drop the bomb from extremely high, and it's highly unlikely that the impact would result in either an explosion or the bomb getting hot enough to cause a reaction that results in nuclear detonation. However, you have to remember that under normal circumstances, these warheads are very, very, very closely monitored and maintained to ensure that they are nice and safe. When you've lost one, a feral nuke, if you will, it's much more difficult to manage. Jeffrey Lewis, Director of East Asian Non-Proliferation Program at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies in California, summarizes the real fear of all of this quite succinctly when he says,
I think we have this fantasy that the people who handle nuclear weapons are somehow different than all the people we know, make fewer mistakes, or that they're somehow smarter. But the reality is that the organizations that we have to handle nuclear weapons are like every other human organization. They make mistakes. They're imperfect. I don't like that quote.
It's not very reassuring, is it?
No. I know that it makes sense, but I don't like it. I don't like it, Chris.
Well, enter Stanislav Yekrovich Petrov, the
Lovely
man
name.
who saved the world.
Huh?
So during the height of the Cold War, Soviet and American nuclear teams were on even higher alert than they are today, poised at a moment's notice to obliterate the opposing side. Petrov was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Force whom was on duty on the 26th of September 1983. He was sipping his cup of hot vodka when suddenly the normally silent response system in front of him went off. According to the display in front of him, the USA had just launched a nuclear missile and it was headed right for us. Suddenly, more beeps. 5 more missiles had been launched by Uncle Sam. Sam, now of course standing for surface-to-air missile. Petrov looked at the Frankenstein's monster awaking in front of him for the first time in history and said, this is malfunction. I don't believe.
Kind of like Obi-Wan in the latest Obi-Wan series. There's a tremor in the Force. I'm sure it's nothing.
So Petrov decided that this wasn't right. I mean, what would cause the USA's to launch 5 nukes in an all-out assault? It made no sense. Thankfully, he did not immediately report the machine's alert to his superiors, who were far more military-minded and may very well have responded with real nukes. Due to his inaction, Petrov gained the title, in the West at least, as the man who saved the world.
The man who was so chill, he was totally inactive.
And it was actually a rare weather event that set off the alarm. So the Ruskies would have ended up with polemy all over their faces, and we would all be dead. It just goes to illustrate the margin of error that can be involved in nuclear management. I mean, it is entirely possible to lose a bomb, after all. There are...
32 times.
Well, exactly. There are, that we know of, 6 nukes out there that cannot be entirely accounted for. So, just to pause for a second, there are obviously some very real nuclear threats in the world at the moment, and I don't want to gloss over how devastating these weapons are. Only 2 have, ever been used in wartime, dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to close out the Pacific theater of World War II. The scale of destruction these bombs unleashed are not to be undersold. They were very early versions of the weapon, atomic bombs as they were known then, And as we record this in 2022, Putin is threatening the use of tactical nukes in Ukraine. North Korea is constantly testing longer and longer range missiles, and that's not to mention the tension that exists between most of the nuclear nations and the West. And I really hope that no nuclear weapon is ever used again. And I imagine that everybody listening to this would share that feeling.
Yeah, 100%.
There are, though, 6 lost nuclear weapons out there. But as you asked before, Linz, how do you lose a nuke? Not in a daring heist, but in a broken arrow incident when weapons simply go missing. Perhaps down the back of the couch? I mean, Linz,
Chris.
how do you think you'd lose a nuclear bomb?
I imagine you either lose it in transport or it goes missing in storage, or it gets illegally traded off and covered up somehow. And other than that, I do not know. And I'm not sure I want to know because I already don't want to sleep tonight. I am scared.
Well, let's find out. The first incident, I should say when I say first incident, this is not the first incident of losing a bomb, just the first incident of losing it and not managing to retrieve it. Then that was in February 1950, so 5 years after the bombs were dropped in Japan. A mock nuclear bombing run was being conducted by the US military. A Convair, that's Con there, not Con Air, B-36 bomber was flying from a US airbase in Alaska to one in Texas when it suddenly developed engine trouble across 3 of its engines. Now, please don't ask me why they had an actual nuclear weapon on board while they were doing this dry run, but hey. After struggling to maintain the craft, the crew were ordered to drop the bomb, which would be much more controlled than in a plane crash. And this was due to be dropped over the Pacific Ocean near Vancouver. The bomb, a 30-kiloton Mark IV Fat Man, did explode with a loud flash. However, the nuclear material was not primed and therefore did not create a nuclear explosion. It did, however, sink down to the watery depths where it still rests today, over 70 years after the incident.
Ew, vintage Atlantic Fat Man.
Supposedly the bomb lacked the plutonium core, but it still contained way more uranium than you would ever want to misplace, especially in the ocean, where you might get things like fish that you eat from.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. This is a lot more scary in ways I never thought of. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's much less insidious and more stupidious. 6 years later, in March 1956, a B-47 bomber just vanished.
Excuse me?
No, just disappeared into...
Like a UFO disappeared?
Yep, completely just pop, disappeared.
Well, I think you know what that means, Chris. Anyway.
So the bomber had just completed its first refueling, airborne, and was due to refuel again on a tanker situated in the Mediterranean basin, except it never showed up. The B-47 never landed, neither did it make contact by radio, which is exceptionally strange. Following investigation, it was judged that the plane had likely crashed into the sea, complete with its nuclear payload. However, it has never been rediscovered.
That's what you think, Chris. I mean, did it accidentally crash, or was it left there for a later pickup that no one would ever check on?
Well, that is very true. And this is the most conspiratorial, I would say, of all of these incidents, because they've never managed to locate it. They have no idea what happened to this particular bomber. It just disappeared.
Interessant, we should say.
Now, in 1958, in February, during another simulated combat mission, was taking place over the state of Georgia when a B-47 bomber collided with an F-86 fighter plane, which is pretty shitty in itself, but when you realize that the B-47 bomber was carrying nuclear bombs, it gets even worse.
Wait, they just collided mid-air with nothing else to collide into. They just happened to collide into each other.
Exactly.
Huh, okay.
They just collided in mid-air.
Right, okay.
Now,
Weird.
the B-47 bomber is quite a hefty plane and wasn't destroyed. They tried to land several times on an airbase, but due to the fact that it had been smacked square in the chops by a fighter plane, their systems could not safely land in the condition. So the bomb was then dropped a few miles away from the mouth of the Savannah River and was never recovered. Now,
Oh, come on, Chris. How?
reportedly, the bomb was carrying everything but the nuclear material, or part of the nuclear material, I should say. Forces searched for the point of impact but never found their missing bomb, which is still out there, supposedly just a few miles from the mouth of the Savannah River.
Okay, so treasure hunting or geocaching for any listeners out there?
Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah, I was kidding. Please don't do that.
Now, this next one, in January 1961, so the 60s quite busy for these incidents, a B-52 bomber crashed shortly after takeoff in North Carolina, and 2 nukes were on board in the crash, one of which was recovered, but later officials found that 3 of the 4 arming mechanisms in the bomb had been activated, making this almost the day known as the day North Carolina was accidentally wiped off the map.
Oh.
The other bomb was never recovered, but it was located 20 feet below ground where the bomb had buried itself during the impact. After trying to remove the bomb, the US Army Engineer Corps decided that they were just going to do the next best thing and bury it again. Buy the land around the bomb, pop up a lovely little fence, and Bob's your uncle. Job's done. It's just there now.
Really?
For eternity.
A bomb? Well, I guess that's what I thought they did with them, just buried them and thought, time will take care of it. Time is in centuries. With a picket fence. That's a nice touch.
Yeah, so the exact location has not been revealed, but the US Army does own all of the land around it, so nobody can buy this land and accidentally build something on top of a nuclear bomb, which is
Well, that's good. Nice. Yeah, that's at least one good thing from this.
So in December of 1965, a bomb just rolled off a ship.
Oh, like a large seal accidentally caught in a net.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to it than that.
But we don't have time to get into details, Chris. You know that.
I mean, somehow, not just a bomb, but a whole plane managed to roll off a ship off the coast of Japan with a 1 megaton bomb strapped to it.
Oh my God.
Somebody must have forgotten the handbrake.
Imagine being the guy responsible for that.
Well, unfortunately, he went down with it as well.
Oh, embarrassing in all the ways.
The bomb, the plane, and the pilot all sunk into the inky darkness. The US Army did the responsible thing and didn't tell anybody for 15 years.
Well, you don't want to cause a panic when all those things have fell into the warm, loving embrace of the Cthulhu.
No, and, it's not like Japan might be a bit touchy about this subject either.
Oof.
And even when they did admit to it, they tried to claim the incident was actually 500 miles away for land, when in reality it was only 80 miles of the Kikijima Islands in southern Japan.
It's not that close. Don't worry about it, Japan.
Yeah, 500 miles, 80 miles, it's the same thing.
Same thing, It's not your house. Calm down.
Now, obviously, Japan wasn't very happy when they found out about this, and they have banned the US from transporting nukes through Japanese territory as a direct result of this incident. And finally, that we know of, in 1968, 250 megaton nuclear-tipped weapons were lost when the USS Scorpion submarine sank, killing all 99 souls on board. Those massive warheads are still down there, and due to their combined size are 500 times the size of that one that just rolled off a ship in Japan.
Did you say 500 times?
500 times. They're 250 megatons. So 2 of them, 500
sweet
megatons.
Jesus. Gigamaxed nukes. Amazing.
And the only word that I can think of to describe this is Christ.
Shit.
Now, part of the submarine was recovered using a modern version of the US government's crackpot Howard Hughes scheme, but the nukes, again, were not recovered.
Well, I kind of get it, because you said that they can just sort of embed themselves like 20 feet down. So it's probably a little hard to recover them, although they're 500 times the size. Yeah, whatever.
Well,
I'm scared.
The ones that that go into the ocean won't bury themselves. They'll just lie on the ground or eventually get covered in silt and so on. But the ones,
Kind of burying themselves, but not.
Yeah. But not
I
quite
guess
20
not
feet.
beneath. Yeah, it's sort of like a blanket of shit.
What a lovely way to describe it. A blanket.
A blanket of ocean poop.
So, Linz, what are your thoughts on this? Are you going to sleep well tonight?
No, I'm never sleeping again. In fact, I'm going to live every day like it's my last. So if I go completely insane over the next several months, I blame you, Chris. Thank you very much. This has been horrific.
Well, to return to Jeffrey Lewis's warning from earlier in the episode, we tend to think that these type of things are just infallible. Their processes may be, but like a toddler in a room full of balloons, the human element can cause things to go kaboom.
Yeah.
A doctor can make mistakes, a sniper can shoot the wrong target, a prime minister can sink an entire economy in less than a month, and nukes can go missing. Humans are humans, except when they're lizards, but even lizards make mistakes. Human error occurs for almost all major mistakes. We aren't all complete idiots, though. Stanislav Petrov used human judgment to avoid complete nuclear destruction for the world. But just think for a second. How many mistakes do you make on a daily basis? How many times have you filed the wrong paper at work or forgotten to put the handbrake on and sent a bomber carrying a nuke into the watery depths? Small mistakes can lead to big consequences. So next time you hear about something dangerous existing near you, just remember that no matter how many processes, checks and balances institutions put in place, humans will still fuck it up.
There's always someone who's a bit too sleepy, not doing the job right.
The world has come closer to nuclear destruction than we may ever know, but hopefully we will never need to find that out. But don't let that keep you up. Sweet dreams.
Thank you very much, Chris. And this is a ASMR for the people with anxiety. Good luck.
Now, I mean, one thing that we do need to say is that, you'll notice that all of these incidents took place prior to the beginning of the 70s. So,
yeah.
Obviously.
But Chris, I think these things still happen. I think we're all suspicious that they've happened. And then we kind of go, that would never happen, not in this modern age. But that's probably what people said in the 70s too. Exactly. It's never a modern age.
We tend to think that these things are infallible. If you live near a nuclear power station, something like all it would take would be the wrong person to press a few buttons a few times for some very bad things to happen. Of course, there are safety checks, there are procedures in place, there's also, fail-safes and so on. But
there's also humans, behind all those things.
To fuck absolutely everything up.
Yes. I love it when Chris does episodes like this because it reminds me of why I initially wanted to call this podcast Dystopian Simulation Radio. Obviously I came up with this name during the pandemic, but every time Chris does an episode, it does remind me that this is why we stuck with this name.
Nukes are terrifying. I just find that the very existence is awful, but also, as you may see in a moment, potentially necessary.
Oh.
So before we wrap things up today, I want to talk for a minute about a video game series called Metal Gear Solid. Have you played it?
Was it Snake?
Yeah, Solid Snake.
Solid Snake, yeah. I have I don't know if he's listening, but a shout out to Gustav. He's a friend of mine. He lives in Gothenburg in Sweden. He has a band called Mindustry, a metal band. Check it out. And he's obsessed with Solid Snake.
Well, I love the video games. Metal Gear Solid is it's one of my favorite video game series. I highly recommend it if you've never played it. I'm not going to explain the plot here because we would be here for literal years. But in short, in the 5th entry, The Phantom Pain, which is, I love that name, you end up creating your own nation of soldiers who live on a kind of oil rig. And stick with me, this is where it becomes relevant. Hideo Kojima, the creator of the game, is a very interesting person. And he's very much an auteur in the same way that Alfred Hitchcock is for his films. He weaves themes throughout his work, and one of those is the possession of nuclear weapons and what a nuclear-free world might mean. Now, in the multiplayer element of the Phantom Pain, you have your own little oil rig, and many others on the server have their own little oil rig. Each has soldiers to defend the base, and you have weapons that can attack other bases to acquire their resources. The ultimate weapon that you can work towards creating is a nuclear bomb. But this is where the game does something very interesting. It conducts a social experiment. The unknown goal of the players on each server is complete nuclear disarmament. Despite the game allowing you and almost encouraging you to create these nukes, the experiment was to see if any server could work together to remove all the nuclear weapons. If this occurred, a special cutscene would play, but I'm sad to say that it has never been played. The cutscene has been hacked out of the game, but it has never legitimately been triggered. Players just kept building nukes. And despite the best efforts of some very dedicated anti-nuclear teams, and I would point you towards a Did You Know Gaming video on YouTube that I would recommend if you want to find out more about this subject, they never managed to legitimately achieve this. So, much like in the real world, these virtual servers made moves towards nuclear disarmament, but never managed to completely achieve it, because the bigger bases, or nations if you will, were unwilling to give up their nukes. The nuclear deterrent is simply too alluring. So I just thought that was a really interesting little social experiment, one which I was a part of as well, unknowingly.
Yeah. And we all know the best form of defense is attack. I'm kidding. But yeah, I think most people think like that. Like, I don't want to be attacked, so to defend, I have to attack first. I think that's kind of a lot of people's mentality. And it's kind of scary, but can we blame people? I don't know.
Well, have you ever heard of something called mutually assured destruction?
Yes.
It's a great band, and I really recommend their 3rd album. So mutually assured destruction, or MAD as it's known, is the concept that the superpowers all have nukes pointed towards each other. And this is actually somehow maintaining peace, because the other side is afraid that the other will wipe it out if they launch their nukes. So you would be mental to launch a nuclear weapon or to use one, because you'd essentially be signing the death warrant of everyone within your country. And this is why it's known as mutually assured destruction, because the nukes from the other side will be launched automatically if you launch nukes on them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. This is what it's come to, I suppose.
Well, as I said, thankfully, no nuclear weapons have been used in war since World War II, and I really hope that they won't be used in any form, full, tactical, or otherwise, in the near or far future. But I mean, I've been to both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I've visited the peace museums they had there. I've been to the sites. I've stood on the site where the nuclear bombs were dropped, and it's a sobering experience. And I would highly encourage anybody to go to those places if you can. It's the type of place where I think everybody should go once in their life. It's a very sobering experience, I'll put it that way. When you see, well, in Hiroshima especially, ironically, there's a building called the Genbaku Dome, which used to be a town hall, I believe, which has been left up. And it's very close to the impact point. But for whatever reason, it survived the blast, and it's just in absolute tatters. And it stands over this beautiful park that they've constructed, this gorgeous peace park. And it's just this big honking thing in the background. It's a constant reminder of what happened there.
Isn't there also like, wasn't there like permanent shadows of the people who were standing around when those bombs actually went off too? I remember seeing pictures like that.
They have a couple of examples of that in the museums that they had there. So yeah, you can see that, and it's there's no other word for it other than sobering. Unfortunately, I'm not being my vocabulary is not benefiting me at this time of night that we're recording it. But it is
yeah, it's very late.
Yeah. It's not a nice thing to see, but I think it's a really important thing for people to see. A lot of people go places like Auschwitz and the killing fields, things like that. It's a similar sort of...
The River Kwai.
Yeah, the River Kwai as well. It's a similar sort of feeling that I've got from Hiroshima and Nagasaki when I went there. So this is certainly not an episode in favor of nukes or kind of, hoping more will be lost or anything along those lines.
Yeah, it's just another entry into the dystopian simulation that we seem to be living in.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah,
when you really think about it. Just think about it for a second. Take a moment. You're shit scared. That is horrible.
Everything's terrifying when you think about it.
Yeah. So, that's everything I had.
So
anyway,
Linz.
Moving on. Anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap this episode up?
No, I am scared. Thank you, Chris. Anxiety is level 100.
Just remember, for all of the UFOs we talk about,
there's a missing
nuke.
Yeah. That'll be a future episode. But Chris, thank you for breaking up all of the silly episodes that we have. Not that they're silly, we have a lot of UFO abduction things. We have spiritualism things, demonic things. And now and again, sprinkled in it, we have episodes like this. And I think this is why people like to stick around, a bit of reality and a bit of what if. So thank you so much, Chris, for sharing this episode with us today. It's been really interesting. I've learned a lot.
You're very welcome. I hope everyone's enjoyed this. A little bit different from us, but stick around next time when we're returning back to something, well, I don't know, because we don't tell each other before we do these episodes.
Well, it's me, so it's going to be something weird as shit.
So thank you very much for listening to today's episode. You can find us on Instagram at d.s. You take it, Liz.
At d.s.radio.
And over on Patreon.
At patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio.
So until next time, just remember, the nukes are out there.
Put on your handbrake.
Bye.
Bye.
No other nuclear nation published. I've gone all.
It's okay. You just need to go la 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 la.
Right.